Hello, my name is Gergely Vizi. I'm from the Miklos Architectural Faculty of Szent Istvan University. I'd like to speak about green facades and living walls, or we can say vertical gardens. Vertical gardens can be used to plant vegetables, but here I will only speak about it from the architectural aspect. So let's get started. Frank Lloyd Wright once said, "A doctor can bury his mistakes, but an architect can only advise his clients to plant vineyards." Is that right, that if we put vegetation to the facade, it is just for cover, or can it be part of the design? It turns out that his suggestion is also a good idea for creating handsome buildings. Green facades and living walls are outspacing green roofs as the environmentally correct way to wrap a structure. Now, let's see what are the advantages and disadvantages of a vertical garden. They reduce cooling loads in summer by shading and evapotranspiration. Blanket effect also cuts heating loads in winter, with the green layer acting as an extra insulation. It shades the walls at summer and lets the sunshine warm up the wall at winter after the plant loses their leaves. As the plants grow, they trap carbon dioxide and produce oxygen, and soaks up such pollutants as lead and cadmium. Green walls absorb noise, help reduce the heat island effect, keep cities cooler, visible to the public, and as Wright noted, these interventions can hide a lot of ugly buildings. Disadvantages are that they provide habitat for insects and spiders. It gives an extra load to the structure, and it needs an elaborate watering system, and they need maintenance. I mentioned heat island effect, but what is it exactly? It is a phenomenon that is caused by replacement of trees and other vegetation with buildings, roads, and other heat-absorbing infrastructure. They heat up as the sun shines, and then they reflect the heat back to the air. So it makes a 4-6 degrees heat difference. The city gets warmer than the countryside. There are two types of green walls, as Randy Sharp describes. Green facades, where a trellis structure is attached to the ground or facade, and living walls, where the wall becomes the growing medium. In this slide, I'd like to present in two columns the difference, or rather the earmarks, of the green facades and living walls. Green facades usually have a structure fastened to the wall, provides a trellis for viners and climbers. It can be welded wire fence or stainless steel cables. The vegetation can be planted in the ground or in containers. Vegetation can be vines or climbing plants. Unlike green roofs, vertical gardens can more easily be retrofitted onto buildings without adding significant structural loads. Green walls are easy and cheap to install. Living walls needs conventional soil or layered felt growing medium. Since the plants are living in this medium, it needs an irrigation and nutrient delivery system. The growing medium is heavy, so the wall that we want to use as a living wall needs to be designed to bear with the extra load, or it needs an extra support structure which holds the modular grid of wall panels, which contains the growing medium. and it needs elaborate watering system. Living walls are more complicated and expensive. So now let's have a look at these different advantages and disadvantages in detail with some example. First, green facades. First, some disadvantages. It takes time to grow on site. Pre-growing is really hard, but advantages are it has less weight on the wall, and it is cheaper and requires simpler or no watering system. You can see a nice example on the picture. You can not only grow plants from the ground, but you can put them into containers and fasten them onto the facade. At the left side, I give some plant species which are usable to have nice green facade, and on the right side I present an example for a green facade structural system with containers. The containers are fastened onto the facade, and trellis system is built in front of it and fixed with wall anchors. The vegetation is grown in the containers and can climb on the trellis. This solution is not only nice, but shades the facade also. Plants can climb on the trellis, or we can use steel cables or wire fencing. Some can even climb on the walls without any help. Here I have to mention that plants don't like metal, because it can get too hot or too cold. Plants prefer wooden trellis. Now let's see some examples. On the first one, the Harbor Day School, you can see the containers from which the vegetation grows and the wire fence. When this picture was taken, the building was new, and as I mentioned, it takes time for the vegetation to grow and fill the facade. In the student house on the left and this marketplace on the right, the vegetation goes directly from the ground. These are also early stages, so the vegetation has not yet filled the facade. Thus, you can see the trellis system. Now in these two examples, where the vegetation filled more from its place, it really takes years till the green facade reach their full splendor. The trellis can be a full outer facade, or can be an additional full frame around the building. After time, it will cover the full desired area. Of course, it has to be shorn around the windows, but look at the thickness of the vegetation. It is a 20-25 cm thickness. It shades the facade in the summer, and it can work as a heat insulation in winter. Finally, here is a nice plan from my home city Budapest. Here the vegetation hangs and not climbs from the containers. This is also a solution, but might not be controlled as much as the climbing vegetation. Now let's talk about the second type of green walls, the living walls. Living walls have two subtypes. So first we will talk about the hydroponic living walls. French botanist Patrick Blanc created his hydroponic living wall system with waterfalls and soilless walls. He used only a layered felt. Although the ecological factor of some of the materials are in question, especially the waterproof sheeting made of polyvinyl chloride, but the idea is brilliant and established the system for the living walls. The system is simple and can be used as a suspended facade or a full facade. In both cases, it has a structural scaffold which has a waterproof membrane and rooting substrate on the front. The plants are placed into the rooting substrate, forming the living surface. The system has an irrigation diffuser at the top and a bottom footpad with drain to collect nutrient solution. Since the rooting substrate is a thin felt, the irrigation has to be continuous. In the next slide, I give a more detailed section. You can see the wall anchors and the layered felt sacks or bags which holds the plants. On the right side, you can see the picture of the detail. Plants, layer felt, waterproof sheeting, and the wall anchor. In these two pictures, you can see the bags for the plants and the drain which collects the remaining nutrient solution. On the right picture, you can see Jean Nouvel's solution for separating windows from vegetation. And on the left, if a heat insulation is required, bigger wall anchors can be used. And this is the full view of the museum in Paris, designed by Jean Nouvel. It is really eye-catching. On this table, I summarize important properties for hydroponic living walls. It can be seen that it is thin and light system, where you have to provide a water tank, where you can also collect rainwater, and you have to provide continuous water circulation. Environmental benefits are clear. It traps carbon dioxide and also cools the air by evaporating. I said hydroponic many times, but what does it mean? Where did this idea came from? Patrick Blanc, who invented hydroponic living walls, was a botanist, so his idea came from artificial production. Nutrient film technique is one of the 6 hydroponic systems. It has a constant flow of nutrient solution which is pumped into the growing tray or up to the facade in our case, and this flows over the roots of the plants and then drains back into the reservoir. There is usually no growing medium used other than air. Normally the plants are supported in small baskets. The disadvantage of this system is that it is very sensitive to power outages and pump failures. The roots dry out very rapidly when the flow of nutrient solution is interrupted. The idea of the system is great, but is there a better solution? We would need a system that allows for the grabbing action of the roots. We would need larger pockets. We would need a cell technology system where the configuration allows the roots to migrate at least enough to accommodate the fullest needs of the plant. And the technology is needed where we have a simpler and not continuous watering system. And yes, we have a better system, the media-based living walls. The advantage of the media-based living wall lies in the fact that this media can support beneficial bacteria, microorganisms, and provide matter to hold water. Some of these type of walls can go weeks with no irrigation. They provide a means for the root to grab and lock themselves in the free drainage to prevent sitting water, and proper means for root development, and be advised to choose the correct plant for the geographic region and the elevation. Media-based living walls can have wall panels with growing media. At the top of each wall panel there is a water line tube for irrigation, and at the very bottom there is a drain to collect remaining water. A support is needed to hold the wall panels. If heat insulation is required, spacers can connect the frame with the facade. Remember, this system is heavier than the hydroponic system. A wall panel can look like this and can be made from plastic or aluminium. They are not really sustainable materials. And the growing media can be real soil or cocoa husk or even rock wool inserted into geotextile bag. Now let's watch a short video describing the system.
There's a bit of a buzz in Australia at the moment about vertical gardens and roof gardens, and it follows on from experiences in Europe. Now, the owners of this garden, by the way, we discovered it when we were judging a garden competition, are Ray and Suzanne. Now, they saw this concept in a larger format in Paris and Dubai and decided to bring it right back here to Australia. Looks fantastic, and it's actually quite simple to put together. I'm going to show you how. First up, you need to construct a strong frame to which everything's attached. This is expanded propylene sheeting, but you could use marine ply. The growing medium is called rock wool, and it's completely inert, but it does act as a super sponge, absorbing and holding many times its own weight in water. The rock wool slabs are held in place by knitted shade cloth. Well, next up is setting up the reticulation system, and it's very simple. Basically, a pipe comes up from the pump, goes out sideways into a bit of a tree structure, and you can see these drippers then coming off, and they literally plunge straight into the grow wool. Now, the idea is that that trickles down right to the base into this little tiny reservoir here, gets picked up by the micro pump and taken to the top again. So these only cost a couple of cents per day to run, the pumps, and what you've got is a recirculating hydroponic system. The next job is to make small incisions into the shade cloth, then make tiny planting holes with your fingers into the rock wool, and then knock as much of the soil as you can off the roots of your plants. Tuck the roots into the prepared pocket and use a small piece of wet rock wool to hold them in place. Now, as you can see, this is very intensively planted. There's over 24 individual plants on the board, and it ranges from marjoram, coriander, we've got sage here, chives, basil, and down the bottom, mint, because it's such a mad grower. And on the other side, this is gotu kola, the arthritis herb. The nutrient solution is made up with our old favourites, sea salt and power feed. You need 2 mils per litre of water of each of them. So we've got 15 litres of water here, which means 3 capfuls of each into the reservoir. To help your plants get instantly over any transplant shock, give them a squirt of the foliage feeder. Now, I reckon these home-sized vertical garden units are just the shot to have a bit of fun with, to put a bit of ornamentation around your house, and also to grow, of course, a heap of herbs. But in the long term, I think we'll see a lot more of them in major installations and buildings because of their ability to reduce the energy that we need inside buildings for cooling and heating.
And now I show you some examples, and we can discuss what happens at winter. How will our facade look like? Will they even survive winter? As you can see, it is not bad. The color changed, but still look nice. The main idea is to use proper vegetation for the climate and protect it against wind, not to let it remove moisture from the plants and from the growing media. And warmer days provide an ideal time to irrigate the walls. 4 more examples coming. One car store, a nice BMW Mini Cooper, and the bank we saw before. The third is an example for an inner green facade. They can be used even inside. And the last one is a food store. The living wall can be just a decoration or part of the name or logo of the store. Before we finish, I give a table to compare these 3 different vertical gardens. Here you can see advantages and disadvantages for each type. Green facade is cheap, easy to install, hydroponic living walls are light but weather sensitive, media-based living walls needs to be irrigated only once a week, but they are heavy and expensive, for example. And finally, which is sustainable? In my view, green facades seems to be more sustainable, because living walls use some non-sustainable materials, but you can decide it for yourself. I want to close my presentation with another quote. Hundertwasser said, "Plants are the best tenants because they don't pay with money but oxygen." Thank you for your attention.